High-level diplomats from the Indo-Pacific are taking part in the historic NATO meeting today as the bloc seeks to engage countries in the region. They include Japan, New Zealand and Australia's foreign ministers, as well as South Korea's deputy foreign minister. Our Washington correspondent Kate Fisher spoke to the US ambassador to NATO, Julianne Smith, earlier today.
Ambassador, firstly, thank you for giving us this time. I wanted to start by asking you, what relevance does the North Atlantic Treaty Organization have to the Indo-Pacific?
Well, over the last couple of years, the alliance has started tuning in to events in the Indo-Pacific. More specifically, it actually mentioned the PRC for the first time in its release of its new strategic concept, which is kind of the mission statement at NATO. We drafted a new strategic concept last year, and I think that signaled that allies are increasingly concerned about the PRC as a systemic challenge, as a country that is challenging the rules-based order. And as such, the allies have been looking to strengthen their relationships with a variety of countries across the Indo-Pacific. So we'll be meeting in a couple of days with our friends from Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and the Republic of Korea, just to give you one example. So those four countries in the Indo-Pacific are all NATO partners. NATO has 30 members, about to be 31, and it also has 40 NATO partners around the world. And so those four nations have been developing individual partnerships with the NATO alliance. Each nation can shape its partnership with the alliance in any way it sees fit. Primarily, we've been focusing with these countries on how we can share best practices and unique insights on the hybrid tactics that countries like the PRC and Russia increasingly rely on. So over time, both the Indo-Pacific partners and the NATO alliance both decided that they wanted to strengthen and deepen those partnerships. And as such, for the first time last year, we decided to include those four countries in a NATO ministerial, and that practice will be repeated just in the next day or two here in Brussels.
Now, there are reports that an Asian version of NATO might be on the cards. A recent pact signed by the Philippines and Japan for disaster relief is being viewed as a possible precursor to some kind of broader framework for defence cooperation in the region. Would you at NATO welcome that?
Well, we will leave it to each country to determine what alliances it either wants to join or possibly create. What we're interested here at NATO headquarters is looking for opportunities to increase our engagement. We find it incredibly helpful and informative and productive to have our Indo-Pacific partners join us for meetings here at NATO headquarters to talk about things like threats to critical infrastructure, or how to build resilience, or how to defend against cyber attacks. These are challenges that many countries around the world face. And so we see great utility in enhancing our relationships with countries, particularly other democratic allies that want to engage the alliance on those types of issues.
And what example does the war in Ukraine offer to countries in the Indo-Pacific who are concerned about an increasingly aggressive China?
Well, that's a good question. And what we've been talking here at NATO headquarters about is the fact that the Ukrainians are not only defending their own territory from Russian aggression, they're fundamentally protecting and defending the key principles of the UN Charter, the principles that pertain specifically to state sovereignty and territorial integrity. And for that reason, I think the support that Ukraine has seen, over 50 countries around the world are currently providing security assistance, and many, many more are providing humanitarian and economic assistance. I think that support sends a very strong signal to other countries that may someday entertain the possibility of violating another state's sovereignty. So some of the countries that we watch very closely, such as the PRC, but also Iran, are taking note of what's happening in Ukraine, and not only taking note of what's happening on the ground, but they're taking note of the global support that's been on full display to stand behind Ukraine, both in their fight to defend their territory, but also in voting to condemn Russia's aggression in an organization like the United Nations. And I think all of that sends a very, very strong signal to the PRC in particular.